Taking your art business online is not easy, but it needs to be simple, because the reason it's challenging for most of you is you're over complicating it. There are only two things that you need to be focusing on in order to make more money as an artist on the internet. And I'm going to walk you through those two things. And with each of those two elements, there are essentially 6 tasks that you should be doing every 90 days. And those tasks get easier and easier the more you do them. So I'm going to walk you through all of this front to back. And I promise you, if you take this advice and simplify everything and stop worrying about your website and all the tinkery stuff that you think matters, and you just focus on these two elements, you will make more money in the next year as an artist, guaranteed. So let's jump into it. Welcome to the Stop the Starving Artist podcast. My name is Lennon Bone. I'm so grateful to have you here today. We have seen our community, by focusing on these two elements, make $267,708 since January 1st of 2025. This is really, really fantastic. And I'm telling you, these two things are really powerful, and we're going to get into some slides here in just a second. But I want to remind you that this is the third of 3 videos where we talk about building your business on the internet. The first one, we talk about the main elements. The second one, we talk about the biggest mistakes that we see. And then the third one is this one here, where we actually outline the steps you need to take. So if you haven't watched those other two, I would encourage you to do so, and I'll make sure that they are linked at the end of this video. But let's jump over to the computer and take a look at our visuals. Okay, so let's look at the 6 things that you need in place to have just the basics of a really great art business, right? And those 6 things spawn from 3 elements. One, some sort of monetary goal. So I'd love it if you were willing to create some sort of goal for, the next 90 days, right? And this is something we do in our community. And then we say, okay, well, if that's the goal, right? Then we know that hitting that goal is going to be a byproduct of doing 2 things really, really well, which is getting more people's attention and then making them more offers. In order to hit this number, you need to get more people's attention and you need to make more offers, right? Really, really simple. I love simplicity when it comes to these things, because I want you to realize that now this becomes the goal. We don't even focus on this again until we get to the end of the 90 days, right? Because whether or not we hit this doesn't really matter unless we're focusing on these 2 things specifically. So let's look at how we think about getting more people's attention. Primarily, we're doing this on the internet through content. And so the red means that this is going to take the most time for you. The yellow means that it's going to take less time, and the green means that it's going to take very little to no time at all, right? So let's start with the red and work our way down. You need to have new content that you're testing. And I'm a big proponent that right now, if you don't have content that that works to get more people's attention, you need to be testing new content, right? So what does this mean? This means trying out formats and messages that reach what we call your UBAB, your ultimate badass buyer, and get engagement and grow your account. So just try things. Treat it like a playground. Don't worry too much about making it perfect. Don't worry too much about whether or not it's going to perform, just go for it and then see what does perform. Try new messages, try new formats. What's a format? A format is like some things will be text on screen. Some things might be a talking head. Some things might be, a carousel post, right? So these are the different formats and different messages, meaning what are the stories that you're telling? If you've outlined your ultimate badass buyer, then you'll know what is going to connect more to them, right? And so you start talking about those things. Talk about your values. Talk about your story as an artist. Talk about your story as a human being, okay? So use these different formats, use these different messages, and see what works. Then once you've done that, you look and you see, well, what's working? Works means that there is a format and a message that you can do consistently that you know will get you views and engagement. And we want this because once we have content that works, not only does it make it simpler because we're not having to test a bunch of new stuff, but we can also make things that we know will work and then repost old stuff. And reposting means taking advantage of content that's already worked and literally using it again. So just going back and pulling an old piece of content from a couple months ago that did well and then throwing it out there again. Why not? It doesn't matter. And you're not going to be penalized for that, right? But this is really, really powerful. But it's going to take you a minute because just like anything in your business, if you think of things like a rocket going into orbit, right? It's going to take a lot of power and a lot of energy to get the thing up in the air. So you're going to have to think a lot about new content to test at first, and then you'll be able to lean more into the content that works, which is easier because you now know what to talk about, you know what format to do, right? And then you can start doing a mix of these two things. And so the time that it takes you to do your marketing is way, way simpler, right? So that's getting more people's attention. If you just focused on doing those three things, testing new content, finding out what works, continuing to do that while reposting old stuff, I guarantee you in 6 months, it would be a game changer for you, right? Because your marketing efforts would be way, way easier and you'd know what to do next. So now let's take a look at making more offers. So I kind of hid this over here so that you wouldn't think about it too much until we brought it back. Okay. So when you think about making more offers, I think of three types of offers. You have scheduled offers, meaning this is more like a release. Okay. So when you think about it, this is like dedicated releases, hard pushes where, you might say that once a month or once every 3 months, you're going to do a really hard push where you're putting a lot of effort into that release. You're likely doing something like a wait list or something like that. I mean, if you want more information on this, because I think this is the backbone of your art business, I think every art business needs to have some sort of scheduled release. So if you want to learn how I teach it, go to the link in my description and you can take my free masterclass. It talks about how you would do a scheduled release and what that would look like, right? I do talk about how we can work together if that's something you want to do, but there's no pressure to do that if you don't want. So scheduled releases are dedicated releases, hard pushes, okay? Then we have automated releases. So when you do a scheduled release, the goal is to get people on your email list and essentially on a wait list, right? And then what you can do is when you get them on this wait list, let's say you don't have a scheduled release for some time, right? You can have an automated email going out to your people, every little bit, right? And this is something we're teaching in our community here coming up in the next couple weeks, right? So you can have automated downsells, upsells in your email campaigns. Automated simply means you have it scheduled so that when someone joins your list for the first time, they automatically are going to get these emails and you can offer them an option to buy some of your work along with the option to, if they buy it, upsell, meaning buying something else, because we know that when people buy something, they're more likely to buy something else right away, or a downsell. So if they don't buy, you can send them another email that says, hey, appreciate you checking this stuff out. Maybe the cost is too high, et cetera, et cetera. What about this? I have some prints that are available, right? And this just gives you an opportunity to get more stuff out there. And then lastly, you have what I call soft sales. These are things like stories, email mentions. So in your weekly email list or whatever, you're putting a little something in a PS, or in your stories on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, or in your posts, you're dropping a quick thing that says, hey, by the way, this thing is for sale. If you're interested, go to the link in the bio, things like that. Or just having a random drop where you're like, you know what, I got this thing, I'd like to get rid of it. I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens, right? So we're not really taking the time to schedule this out and knowing really, really well front to back, like what the plan is for pushing out your work. These are more kind of random, a little more haphazard, but that's okay, right? Because if you mix all three of these things, imagine what that would look like if once a quarter you had a scheduled release where you were pushing really hard to get new people in your world, right? And you're doing that by testing new content, figuring out what works, posting more content that works, and then reposting old stuff, right? And then you run this scheduled release. While you're running the release, or while you're even just testing new content in the early stages, right? And once you watch this masterclass on how I do a scheduled sale, you'll understand more what I mean. But you would then have people getting on your list where they may get an automated pitch, right? And then when you're done with your scheduled release, you could just lean into soft sales with the people that you have on your list, continue to nurture them, continue to send emails to them, right? And then have an opportunity there to continue to put sales opportunities out there for your people, right? Now, what I'm not saying is sell all the time, but you need to have a plan for when you're going to sell. What I'm not saying is you have to sell all the time, but what I am saying is you need to have a plan for when you're going to sell. Why? Because the two biggest reasons you're not hitting your goal financially is because you're not getting in front of more people and you're not making more offers. So maybe right now you just need to focus on getting in front of more people, right? Getting more people's attention. That means I would be working hard on this. Okay? If you need help with this, right, still go watch the masterclass because it absolutely talks about what it's like to understand who your ultimate badass buyer is, all that kind of stuff. And then, focus more on making those people offers. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Even if you have a small audience, the faster you can get used to making offers and the faster you can start making more of them, the more comfortable you're going to get with it, the more you're going to feel like it's not some big, scary, hairy monster that's hiding under your proverbial bed, and the more likely you are to have a business that succeeds. Now, once again, some of you are going to look at this and you're going to say, oh, this is salesy. And you're going to think it's salesy simply because we've outlined a plan. That's not true at all. This is what business is having a plan and understanding when you're going to do what and what it takes to get revenue coming in. Because if you're not making sales of your work, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. That was a stingy, wingy thing that one of my mentors told me that it hit me right in the core, and I took it to heart. And so I say it to you not to shame you or make you feel anything bad about yourself, but just to remind you that these two things are how you run a business. You don't need to sell your art if you don't want to, but if you want to, you need to be doing these two things, which means focusing on content that you're testing, content that works, reposting old stuff, having some sort of scheduled release, some sort of automated release or sales opportunity, and pitching soft sales in those in-between times. So as you can see, the main crux of making money has to do with some sort of scheduled release that you're doing, likely every 90 days, could be twice a year. But if you want to see how I teach that, you can go to stopthestarvingartist.com/posts to profit, and that will take you to the free masterclass. The The link is also in the description below. Again, stopthestarvingartist.com/posts to profit. And again, if you haven't checked out the first 2 episodes of this 3-episode series, they are linked right here. So go check those out. And don't forget, you don't make art, you are the art.